Hi there, I'm Shane, and in this video I'm going to be talking about a very special lens, and that is the Leica Summilux 50mm f1.4 ASPH lens. This is a rangefinder lens that has a very compact design without compromising on its image quality or unique profile. However, it comes in at a very significant price point, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my experience with it and my thoughts on the lens. So this is going to be a different video than my regular ones for multiple reasons. First of which is I'm wearing a hat. It's because my hair is super long right now and I'm waiting to get a haircut next week, and I'm just going to wear a hat until then because it's a mess. The second big thing is this is not a Sony lens, and it's not even designed for Sony E-mount. It's a Leica M-mount lens, and it's made for rangefinders. So I'm actually going to be reviewing it from the perspective of someone adapting the lens. And the reason for this is because my friend Spencer was kind enough to lend it to me for a few weeks, and this is his lens, but I've just been using it for all my professional and personal video for the last few weeks now, and just kind of wanted to play around with it. So this isn't going to be my typical definitive review of the lens, but rather a little bit more of an overview because I'm not using it in an optimal setting by using it as an adaptive lens, and I'm not going to be using it for nearly the same amount of time as I normally would before talking about a lens. But with that said, let's get into actually discussing it. This lens has a very long history, with its predecessor dating back to 1960, and over the years Leica has come out with incremental changes to the lens with slight updates. However, in 2004 they made a major redesign of the lens and made the ASPH version, which is the one that I'm using, and with that they came out with more modern glass developing techniques, better coatings internally, and also slightly reconfigured the optical configuration. Though the general image quality and profile of this lens hasn't changed too much since the original version, and the exterior has overall stayed very much the same as well. As this is a fast 50mm lens, it's incredibly versatile and is very useful in a lot of different situations. And it really shines the brightest, I found, in portrait photography as well as street photography, as it's a rather discreet size and it really just has a lovely profile to it. And even though this lens is able to render very nice black and white photos, the colors you get from this lens are also very pleasant, meaning that while you're editing, it's not very difficult to get an image that is visually pleasing. And it probably would work better if it was paired with a Leica camera or a nice film stock. However, I'm going to be using it with Sony cameras, and even on them, I found the profile worked very well. The main selling point of this lens for a lot of people though is the fact that it has an f1.4 aperture, meaning it can get incredibly shallow depth of fields, and the out of focus areas with this lens are absolutely mesmerizing, and it can get some very pleasing photos. Though before I discuss the image quality too much more, I'll talk about the build a little bit. And this lens comes in 3 different versions: the black version that I'm using here, a solid brass version, as well as the black chrome edition, which is just a little bit more stripped down and stays true to the very old original design of this lens. Overall though, this lens is clearly made to be used with a rangefinder camera with its compact build and very tight controls. However, it is surprisingly hefty, coming in at 335 grams for the black edition and 460 for the brass version. This is because it's rather robustly built out of basically all metal, and it's still an f1.4 lens, and you can't really get around the fact you need a decent amount of glass to get your aperture that wide. So it's built very well, and it certainly feels like an expensive lens. The focus ring on it is very nicely dampened and easy to turn. On the black edition and the brass edition, it has a little grip at the bottom to make it a little bit easier as well. And the aperture is easy to control likewise, and has half clicking stops as you rotate the ring, which is smooth and easy to control. One topic I usually don't discuss when talking about lenses is the lens hood. However, this lens has an integrated lens hood that basically just stows away and you just pull it back and turn it and it locks into place. So it's nice that that's there, and it's certainly not going anywhere. So it's very minimal, but it's a cool feature. In the front filter thread of this lens is 46mm, which is a rather odd size. However, on the inside of the lens hood, there's another filter thread that's a more standard 49mm, meaning that it can fit 2 different filter sizes, which is a rather novel concept I've never had on the lens before. Really though, the reason people consider this lens isn't because of its build, even though it is incredibly robust. The most appealing factor is its image quality and profile. And I'm gonna acknowledge again, I'm using this lens in a suboptimal setup. I'm adapting it on Sony cameras. However, I feel the images that I'll be showing should speak for themselves, in that there is no real discernible loss in quality, even though the images might not have the same character they would have if they were shot on a native body. I'll lead with discussing the sharpness of this lens. At f1.4, this lens is acceptably sharp in the middle of the frame, though there is significant fall off near the edges when wide open. However, as you stop it down to f2.8, it sharpens up significantly, and by f5.6-ish, it kind of reaches its maximum performance and carries through quite nicely to its maximum aperture of f16. Though overall, this lens isn't going to be an award-winning sharp lens. That's not what it's designed for. More notably than its sharpness is the amount of contrast this lens maintains well in challenging environments. It has a very pleasing level of kind of micro contrast when put in backlit situations or situations with very harsh lighting. It can create a very pleasing look that doesn't wash out easily, allowing you to get some creative images that wouldn't have been very possible otherwise, especially if you're shooting on film. With regards to distortion, this lens is actually incredibly well corrected internally, and you're never really fighting any warped lines in images. However, the vignetting is rather significant. In at f1.4 is quite noticeable. However, I wouldn't say it's obstructive, but it's definitely there, though it disappears quite quickly as you stop the lens down. A very surprising feature is the fact that this lens has rather good chromatic aberration control. And even when wide open in high contrast situations, you don't notice a ton of Leica in the frames, and it just adds to that kind of profile that this lens has as being a very clean looking image. This now takes us to the part of the review where I kind of go into the deep end and start getting really romantic about this lens, because I'm going to start talking about the image characteristics in the out of focus areas. And if you've seen my previous videos, you know I'm a big fan of shooting wide open when I can, and I just really enjoy having those shallow depth of fields. And this lens certainly delivers. It actually only has 9 rounded aperture blades though. And more significantly, it only makes a kind of round aperture hole from f1.4 to f2.8. After that, the aperture becomes almost star-shaped until you hit f16, where it rounds out again. This is rather interesting because it kind of makes for 2 different looks from the lens. When you're in that mid-range from f2.8 to f11, the background is rather busy in a certain perspective and can have a lot more of a crisp look to it. However, when you're from f2.8 to f1.4, the background basically becomes butter. Like, it is very smooth. This is thanks to the very smooth fall off from in to out of focus areas that's quite gradual, especially compared to more modern lenses. So the images that you get from this lens are both very clean, but have that kind of surreal out of focus effect that makes the images have a unique look that is specific to this lens and kind of makes it one of the kings of shallow depth of field. And it's hard to put what I'm trying to say into words, so hopefully the images here are conveying what I'm trying to say. Because of all these aforementioned features, When using this lens for portrait photography, it really excels in the soft fall off, allows subjects' features not to feel like they're being lost as they're out of focus, while still maintaining a pleasant level of contrast, as well as the fact that the out of focus areas are just so kind of separate from the areas that are in focus that you can have very pleasant subject isolation. This doesn't mean that's all this lens is relegated to, as it's still a fast 50mm lens, meaning you can use it for street photography, landscapes, whatever you like, but portrait photography is, in my opinion, where this lens really excels the most. The last topic I'm going to discuss briefly is using this lens for video use, because that's actually why I borrowed it from my friend originally, and I wanted to try it on the Sony a7S III. And I'm happy to say it worked really well, but I will say that this is not at all a lens designed for video applications. Its compact design kind of kicks you in the butt because it's not easy to handle when using it on a video rig. In the short focus throw that this lens has makes it easy to focus for photos. However, for video, when you want lower transition speeds, it's borderline impossible to use just because your focus throw is so short. However, overall though, the profile and kind of general feel of this lens for video is something else. It gets a very pleasing amount of shallow depth of field while still maintaining that level of contrast, meaning you can shoot in rather difficult environments with this lens as long as you're able to get filtration on the front of it at f1.4 and still get these kind of dreamlike shots. It's incredibly impractical to do so, but it helps me understand why people seek after these Leica Summilux lenses so much for video applications and why Leica makes cine versions of them for obviously larger productions. Before I conclude this video though, I'd be remiss not to address the elephant in the room that I've been ignoring, and that is the price of this lens. It comes in at usually $3,500 to $5,500 US, which is extremely expensive, and it sometimes goes to auction. However, your best bet probably is actually to buy a used version of it because it's very hard to find this lens. In no situation would I ever describe this lens as its value. Its performance to its price is not even comparable. However, that's not really the point of the lens. Leica produces very small batches of lenses, and their Summilux line is intended to be their almost best of the best. There's only one tier above it in their lineup, and this is the more accessible option, and even then it's a very rare lens. So the reason for its price point isn't because it's this magically good lens that just because you're buying a Leica lens, it means you're gonna get these insanely good photos. What you're paying for is a very well-built and passionately designed lens with a unique look. It's not meant to be that definitive perfect lens. It's a Leica lens that has a very novel characteristic to it. So it's important to consider that, and I'm sure if you made it this far into the video, you already are aware of that and know how precious these lenses really are and how lovely they are to use. To wrap this video up though, I'll share my final thoughts, and I'm sure you can tell I thoroughly enjoyed using this lens. However, it is a tad bit tedious to use, especially while adapting it, because it's not made for Sony cameras. It's clearly a rangefinder lens. But I found that the extra work I put into capturing the photos in the extremely pleasing profile this lens had made the actual process of taking the photos that much more satisfying. However, on that note, it's really hard to separate the novelty and kind of unique aspects of this lens from its actual value, because it's disproportionately more expensive than its performance. And especially at this price point, you'd expect a whole heck of a lot more from a lens. However, again, that's not the point of this lens. This lens is an incredibly valuable tool in the hands of a professional and can get these unique photos that aren't really replicable on modern glass, or at least lenses of more modern design. So you're getting a very classic vintage kind of feeling lens, but with all the modern perks to it, with great coatings in quality glass, in incredibly robust design. So it's difficult to actually recommend the lens just because of its price point. However, if you're considering this lens and you're in a situation where it's financially reasonable to purchase it, I think you'll love it. And I certainly wish I could keep this forever. However, I'm gonna give it back to my friend Spencer because I'm sure he wants to use it again too. Anyways, thanks again for watching this video. I really enjoyed making this one. It's been a blast to play around with this lens. And if there's any questions that I can answer for you, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. If you're interested in seeing how I adapted this lens, or just the process of adapting, maybe let me know and I'd love to make a video on that topic. Anyways, thanks again. I hope you have a fantastic day and I'll see you in the next video.